1927, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, the father-in-law of our Rebbe, was imprisoned by the Soviet communist regime for his counter-revolutionary activities, which were really about disseminating and spreading the Torah, the light of the Torah and the mitzvot. And the previous Rebbe led the revolution in Russia, in the communist Russia, and spearheaded the underground activities, the Jewish activities of underground. In 1927, this arrest was number 7. He was arrested 7 times for his Jewish activities. And the previous Rebbe had a beautiful pen. He wrote prolifically, and he wrote movingly. You could see on Chabad.org all the more details and translations. He wrote it in Yiddish or in Hebrew. There it's in English too. He wrote about his time and his stay there, and he writes how some of the most beautiful times in his life are those times of his imprisonment. How every, not just day, but hour and minute is so precious, because it actually sometimes it's the deep suffering that brings a person to greater heights and transformation and light, and enables him to fulfill his mission and purpose in a deeper, more profound way. So he writes all that. You can see more about that on Chabad.org. I encourage you to read up on it. The previous Rebbe wrote about this time in prison. He wrote that knowing that Judaism in Russia, and perhaps by extension the world, was on his shoulders, there was a great concern, obviously, about the outcome of his imprisonment, but he resolved with a strong resolution that he's going to, in his communication with the Russian authorities, he's going to be fearless, direct, bold. I don't know if you use the word chutzpahdik, but completely fearless. The Rebbe talks about this, and despite the circumstances of, obviously, knowing full well, very fully cognizant of the circumstance in which he was in, and the dangers that could bring. But the Rebbe talks about this and connects it to us, and also to this week's Torah portion, where the Rebbe says that in Parshat Chukas, we have a double portion this week, Chukas-Balak, but in this Parshat Chukas, it talks about one of the battles that Moshe Rabbeinu needed to battle in order to help the Jewish people cross over, transition from Egypt to Israel. There was a battle, there were many battles with many nations. One of them was with a mighty giant Og, the nation and the king whose name was Og Melech HaBashan. He was a giant. I don't know how tall he is, but they say Moshe with his sticks and jumps could reach to his ankle. Very tall. Bottom line is, Hashem says to Moshe in this week's Torah portion, Moshe, al tira oto, do not fear him, do not fear Og. Ki biyadcha natativ, I've given you into his hand, given him into your hands. Don't be afraid. The Talmud talks about this and says, first of all, it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah, the Talmud and the commentaries, down to the Rebbe, it says that it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that that Moshe was afraid. Why is Hashem telling us that he's afraid? So the Rebbe explains the Talmudic literature and the Midrashim down to our lesson here. The Rebbe said that a true leader of people, in this case the first king of the Jews, which was Moshe Rabbeinu, he says he's a realistic person. He knows the dangers involved of a situation. So it makes sense for him to be afraid. But what the Torah is teaching us is that don't show your fear. Hashem was telling Moshe, you have fear. Where does that fear reside? You're doing the right thing. It's normal, it's natural to be afraid, to be concerned. But you're doing it the right way. You're not showing it to anybody. Nobody knows that you're afraid. Keep it inside. But not only that, you're doing the right thing by keeping it inside. And said God to Moshe, even that little bit of fear that you have in your heart, I will remove it. I'll take care of it. But you're doing it well. And here's the lesson that the Rebbe said, that Rebbe taught, that every leader of any organization, country, city, state, there will be sometimes obstacles that you feel are insurmountable. Don't let the people know that you're afraid. You could be afraid in your heart, but don't show it. Interesting, right? It kind of flies in the face of our pop culture today. Just be vulnerable, tell it, wear your heart on your sleeves. But the Rebbe says here that the lesson is, if you're a leader in a position of leadership and people are counting on you, don't let them know about your concerns and about your fears. Act as if there are no fears and act boldly. And in your heart, there might be a fear, but God will take care of that. The Rebbe said, moved this on, and said every person, every Jew and every person is a leader. A nasi, the Rebbe quoted the term, in some environment. Whether you're the leader of a country, a state, a city, your community, your shul, your block, or your home, or yourself. Everybody would narrow it down all the way down to yourself. Even if you're just the leader of yourself, you should know that there's times that you'll come to obstacles and challenges in your life which seem insurmountable. They seem like you cannot overcome them, and you're afraid. Says the Rebbe, even to yourself, in your own personal challenge, in your challenge of serving God, being the best Jew you can be. And a person might say to himself or to herself, look at where I am, I know who I am, I know what I am, I know where I'm coming from. I'm the son or the daughter of the king, I'm God's child, but now I'm in a wild jungle. I'm not living up to the lifestyle that a God's child should be. And the Rebbe goes on and says that when a person finds themselves in a jungle, it usually doesn't happen that you exit the window of a palace or the door of a palace deep into the depths of a jungle. Usually there are slips and slides along the way, that little glitches that take you there, many mistakes in our lives that end us in a jungle. Rebbe says a person might be cognizant of all this and feel helpless and feel feared that they can't really get back on track. Says the Rebbe, even if we're in such a situation, whether it's communal or personal, we should show no fear. Those are his words. Don't show it. Not even on your face. No one should detect any fear. Not even yourself. Don't even let yourself know that you're afraid. Says the Rebbe, and God will take care of the rest. Act as if you're not afraid. I applied the phrase here, fake it till you make it. Even if you are afraid, make believe you're not. And God will take care of it, because God is on your side. I was thinking to share another thought, a story. Everything's related. It's not directly related to the Gimble Tamuz. Oh, just last note on that note. On the previous note, the Rebbe said that when an army soldiers go out to battle, they don't go all afraid, even though they might need ammunition, the guns and the swords and the rifles, the machine guns, the tanks and the cannons. The Rebbe quoted a lot of these ammunitions, that tools of war. But even with all that, said it's the spirit that really makes the war victorious, and the soldiers march out with a song, with a victory march right at the start. And that actually helps the victory later on. Back in 770, in the good old days, Yom Kippur night, the Rebbe would end Yom Kippur with Napoleon's March. It's a very victorious Napoleon's March, which the Rebbe borrowed from Napoleon and applied it to our Jewish victory. Anyway, moving on. The story is as follows. The story is that there was a guy, we'll call him David. He tells the story in first person. He's right now working in Israel in a rehab center, helping others overcome their addictions. And he tells the story. He was an Israeli boy who didn't make it in the yeshiva system. He wasn't from a Chabad family or community, but he was somewhat connected. But didn't make it in yeshiva. He went onto the streets. As he grew up, he just decided he wants to go to America and make some money. Came to America and he tried job after job after job. Didn't work out. Nothing worked for him. But knowing Chabad is around everywhere, he went ahead and just visited from Chabad to Chabad house all around the States, getting a free meal. And slowly but surely he also picked up some other habits and he became a druggie. And he needed money to support his habit. So he would also steal from Chabad house to Chabad house, wherever he could get his hands on a few dollars or an item that he could sell. And that's how he supported himself. Meanwhile, he was writing letters back home to his parents saying that everything's okay, he's doing great, he's making some money, and he would send back some money, etc. After a while, a year or two, whatever it was, of living this lifestyle, he realized this should not continue like this. And he wanted to go back and clean up, didn't know how, but he said he's going to go back home and pray. On his way to JFK, he stopped by the Rebbe's Ohel, knowing that that's a place of blessing. And he wrote down, at the Ohel, he wrote down a letter describing his whole life and his lifestyle, everything that he was going through from start to finish with his addictions and the stealing and everything else, and praying for a blessing. Holding a letter in his hand, he goes towards the Ohel, and he says he could not get himself to enter the Ohel. He was embarrassed. He was ashamed of his past, of his current situation, and he couldn't get himself to walk inside. So he just put the letter in his pocket and went onto the plane, went to JFK, went to Israel. A few days later, and then he comes back, and again, he doesn't know what to tell his family. Yeah, everything's great, I made a lot of money, it's coming soon, whatever. Then a few days later, his family calls him for a meeting. His sister was a high-level social worker with a lot of connections, and said, "We know you're in trouble, we're going to help you." "How do you know?" "What do you know? How do you know?" And she said, "When you came back, your mother did some laundry in this paper, this letter, your letter to the Rebbe, fell out of your pocket. We read it, we see your life story, we see what happened, and we're here to help." And they did. And they helped him get into a rehab center, and he transformed his life, and now he's helping others. This brings to mind the original story, not original, but the story of the Mendel Futterfass, an elderly chassid who's since passed already, who had a personal effect on my life. Guided me to go to a Chabad Cheder when I was 11 years old. Actually guided my father to send me there. But he was in the Gulag, also in the Russian Gulag, and he sent a letter to the Rebbe in his mind. And there's my friend Dov playing some music. God bless you, Dov. And he, Mendel Futterfass, said on the first day in the Gulag, he actually wrote a letter in his mind to the Rebbe. It was the previous Rebbe, and he said, "Rebbe, things are horrible. My family, my children, my situation." He was there, I think, for like 17 years or 10 years, I forgot what it was. Anyway, long story short, when he gets out, there was a letter waiting for him, a response, the exact same date of his telepathic letter, of his virtual letter from the Rebbe saying, your letter was received and here are your blessings. And more stories like that. Basically, the idea is that Rebbe would say when the previous Rebbe passed away and people wanted his blessings, he would say, go to the previous Rebbe, go to the Rebbe, and go to the Ohel. And the Rebbe and people would say, but yeah, we want an answer, we want advice, we want a blessing. And our Rebbe would respond, and he would say, you do what you need to do, ask the Rebbe for a bracha, and the Rebbe will know how to respond. The Rebbe will find a way. And that's what he did. And that's what we do. We go to the Ohel, and we write a letter, we daven for salvation, and the Rebbe finds a way to respond. God bless you all. This Shabbos is Yud Beis Tamuz. It's the date on which the previous Rebbe was completely freed. It was actually Gimble Tamuz, the third of Tamuz, which the previous Rebbe was freed from prison, but he was sent to exile, to Kostroma. And 10 days later, on Yud Beis Tamuz, Yud Beis